1. The first time I remember having sleep paralysis, I was 5, sleeping with my brother and sister in the same bed. Woke up, couldn't move. Noticed a black figure sitting on my mother's bed. I could see into her room. My whole childhood it was hard for me to sleep. Always felt something pulling on my blankets. That first experience never really stood out to me as I didn't know what it was. The next experience of SP I was 14, and I thought I had a seizure, so I went to the ER. Told them I couldn't move and was seeing things when I woke up. I guess just by using so much effort trying to move, I almost felt vibratory. Doc said it was sleep paralysis, always got it on and off, just waking up and can't move. Few months later, I wake up on my father's couch with a pitch-black girl on my chest with glowing yellow eyes. Pretty sure it was a young girl, that was the vibe. It came closer and closer to my face, and right as it's about to touch me, it's like it went through my head and disappeared. As soon as that happened, I had the ability to move again. Had to go to school, told my friend. Didn't think he would believe me. I would experience sleep paralysis on and off for a few years, but more disturbing was auditory hallucinations while wide awake. I started to hear growling and smell burning smells a lot. I was convinced I was possessed, was diagnosed with schizophrenia and psychosis. They weren't sure of the severity. They told me the length of my symptoms was a deciding factor, as psychosis usually lasts 6 months to a year. Around age 17 to 18, it was almost impossible for me to communicate with anyone, and I had a lot of strange SP episodes. I had lots of sleep paralysis I wish I could explain, but a lot of times I didn't know what I was looking at. I remember one of the most dramatic was waking up with what looked like a bundle of tentacles above me, and some sort of suction device on my penis. It definitely felt like it was performing a sexual act on me. Around that time I had a lot of SP, and it's kind of vague now, but that always stood out to me. Around 20 I started seeing hooded figures. It wasn't a big deal at first, then I noticed it was a pattern. They looked to be the same beings as the first little girl that was on my chest when I was 14. I've seen the ones with hoods 4 times that I can recall, very vividly. The first and second was not a big deal because I saw them at a distance, and they didn't interact with me much. The third time was when I started to notice the pattern. I was sleeping in my new apartment, and I woke up and it was playing with my toes. It was moving my big toe up and down, and it was looking at me. Never noticed any eyes on the hooded ones. The last time I saw the hooded figures was about 1.5 years ago. I was in a completely dark room with no light sources. Same room I saw the little girl. It was morning when I saw her. But this time it was night, and there was a light shining on the wall in front of me with a hooded figure in the middle. The first time I've ever heard it communicate an audible message, it said, "You know who I am." I totally freaked out and ran into my father's room. He asked me how he could help, and I just told him it's gone now. He told me to come get him if anything else bothers me, but I tried to explain they disappear as soon as you get up, so there's not much anyone can do. I haven't heard or seen anything since that time, and I attribute it to me fighting back and taking control over my own life. I started boxing and following Jesus. Strengthening my body and learning how to fight definitely felt like the right direction. I heard demons react to Jesus' name, so I tried it out. Every time I would enter my house or go into a new room, I would throw combinations and touch every corner of the room, and bless it in the name of Jesus and let it know I was prepared to fight. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I felt like I was fighting for my own privacy and freedom and mind. Every time I would hear a little creak or get a bad vibe, I would say something to the effect of, "In the name of Jesus, enter the light," and send a telepathic message that even though I am a 3-dimensional being right now, when my soul evolves into a higher dimension, I will inflict karma on you in your realm, calling out the beings in the middle of the day and calling them cowards, telling them I'm not scared to fight them. I know they're weak because they only prey on the sleeping. Crazy times call for crazy measures. It worked. Haven't had SP or hallucinated in quite a long time. It's easy to say I was psychotic for 9 years, but at that point you're usually a lifer. chronically mentally ill. I don't exhibit any strange behaviors anymore because I don't hear or see anything anymore. I did what I had to do given my situation. I believe I experienced something from another world, and I got rid of it. 2. So I live in a small town in the south of Sweden, and I work at a local ICA, Sweden's biggest supermarket brand. The village itself is fairly small, with circa 600 inhabitants. This means that our store is also pretty small, with 2 cash registers and 4 or 5 people working each day. Our shifts are laid out so that one person opens the store, with the second and sometimes third coming in when the store opens. Then, in the early afternoon, they get switched out, and 2 other staff members work until it's time to close up. When I first started working there, I didn't really feel like anything was off about the place. It just felt like an ordinary grocery store. But after a few months, I started to work opening shifts, and that's when the weird occurrences began. As before mentioned, when I get the place ready for opening, I work alone, which makes the things that happen scarier. First, right from when I get inside, I will hear loud and strange bumps and thumps. They will come from all around the store, both the actual shopping area, the cash register area, and the storage and staff area. These sounds never occur during the day or when closing. After that, there are often footsteps of people walking around, most often far from where I am, but sometimes close to me and right behind, like someone is following me. The door between the storage area and the shopping area is one of those push and swing doors. I often hear these swing back and forth when I haven't been around them for ages, like someone is walking in and out of them. Sometimes I hear people talking faintly and far away, like people are having a conversation in a different part of the store. I never hear actual words, well, not yet anyway. This could all be my imagination playing tricks on me, I get it. But what really makes me believe it's haunted is the people I see with my own eyes. All around the store are security cameras and a few different staff areas. There are screens where we can watch them on. I will on these screens see people standing by the cash register, in our storage area, in the narrow foot aisles before I have opened the store to the public. I look at the screens and I see them clear as day, but when I step closer or look again, they are gone. Behind our cash register there is a small area with packages and a computer. I will stand there and see a customer wait for me to come and ring their items. But when I have taken those 2 steps, there is no one there. One time I specifically remember a short, stocky lady, completely dressed in red, vanished. And if you think these are the ramblings of one isolated madman, you can ask my co-workers who have all experienced the same things. And all this almost always happens in the morning when we are alone. But some instances have happened in the afternoon when both me and my co-worker saw and heard it at the same time. It is rather chilly. We'll update if anything scarier happens, even though I doubt it since they don't seem very hostile. 3. I used to do house cleaning for a young couple. The husband worked out of town and they had 3 really young kids. I'd generally come in once a month or so whenever the place got really bad. The woman had mentioned beforehand that there were some paranormal events going on. She didn't tell me what they were, because she also wanted me to come in at some point and do a cleaning of the house. Yes, I clean houses, but I also do clearings. She was hoping to get some confirmation on what she and her family were picking up. The first time I cleaned for them, I did a walkthrough and felt nothing until I got down to the basement level. There was a family room down there and also a bedroom with an ensuite bathroom. Her 5-year-old slept in this room and made a nightmare mess in that bathroom, toothpaste and crayons all over the walls, wet toilet paper all over the floor. I could feel a man in the bathroom watching me. He didn't seem malevolent in any way, just watchful. I felt like he was in his 30s, maybe. I kind of felt watched in the family room, but it didn't feel like the man. Kind of felt like a woman, maybe. Again, just watchful. Other than that, the house felt fine, totally clear, very positive. The woman confirmed that her daughter always saw a black man standing in her bathroom. So that was confirmation for them. The mom had seen a man on horseback in the living room once. The house was less than 10 years old, and the whole area had been farmland. One day, the woman took her kids out of town for the long weekend and wanted me to do a cleaning. She hid her house keys in the kids' wagon in the front yard. She asked me to be careful to put the keys back in the wagon, as this was the only key she had. I came in, cleaned both lower levels, then started in upstairs in the master bedroom. I was in the process of cleaning the ensuite bathroom when I heard people talking down in the main entrance. The area was tiled, with a big set of stairs going up to the bedrooms, so their voice carried and were quite loud. I 100% believed it was relatives of the woman. I could hear them talking about her. They mentioned her name and said she was out of town. It sounded like one woman and two men. One of the men sounded very elderly, so I was thinking her parents and her grandfather. The woman was the loudest and seemed in charge. I heard them talk about me. The woman said, "Oh, she's cleaning the house for Sarah." I also heard her say something about the house keys. I had put them beside my purse on a little shelf niche by the door. I felt a little self-conscious being upstairs while they were standing there talking about me, so I took off my gloves and went downstairs to introduce myself. When I got downstairs, there was no one there. I hadn't heard the door close, nor had I heard it open to begin with. The door was locked. The crazy thing was there should have been melting snow and crud on the floors. It was winter, and 3 people coming into a house and standing in the front entrance would have left a puddle on the floor. I had already vacuumed and mopped the whole area. I was amazed and really excited. I wasn't frightened in the least bit. They felt very parental and protective of the family. I was excited to tell my client what I had experienced. I went back upstairs and finished cleaning. When I went to leave, the keys were gone. I know for certain that I had them on the shelf by my purse. In fact, it sounded like the ghosts had seen them too, since they mentioned them. I ended up spending an extra hour and 45 minutes looking for those damn keys. I called out to the ghosts, begged the ghosts, got mad at the ghosts, tried to bargain with them, but to no avail. I didn't have my client's cell phone number, only her landline. The lock was a deadbolt, so I couldn't lock it without the keys. The back door was also a deadbolt. I had no numbers for any relatives. I was envisioning having to spend the entire weekend staying in that haunted house alone. At this point, I was kind of feeling scared, not wanting to sleep there. I searched everywhere. All 3 levels, under couch cushions, in the kitchen drawers and cupboards, the kids' rooms where the toys were. I did a thorough check of the basement bathroom, and even looked outside where the keys had originally been. I was going to give up when I thought I'd recheck the basket on the kitchen counter. It had bread and buns in it, and at the bottom of the basket there were some old flyers. The keys were sitting neatly on top of the flyers under the bread. There was no way that I could have missed them the first time. The keychain had a big gummy flip-flop and a mini Tupperware container on it. I got the fuck out of there and locked the door behind me, so relieved not to have to stay there. When I told the woman after she got back, she said that they often had important things go missing, her husband more than her. She also said that her husband had heard people talking before, but she hadn't. I felt like maybe they really liked her, but weren't so sure about other people. 4. This incident occurred sometime in the fall of 2006. I grew up in a rural part of Ohio. My house had fairly dense woods located directly behind it. As a child, I had a passion for exploring. I especially loved exploring those woods. It was my favorite place to be. Prior to the incident, I had wandered through those woods many times, always with my mother's permission. There was one tree in particular that I frequently enjoyed to climb, usually about to the halfway mark, so I could perch myself on one of the heavier branches and just relax as I listened to the peaceful sounds of nature. Climbing that tree for the very first time was quite an accomplishment. From that position, I could partially see the back of my house. On that day, after a fair amount of exploring, I carefully scaled my favorite tree. I seated myself on a sturdy branch and took in the view. Naturally, being late in October, the sun inevitably began to set within a few minutes. I always felt a little saddened to see the darkness approaching. The woods were like my own little sanctuary. I could entertain myself out there for hours. When darkness began to fall, however, my mother would stand at the edge of the woods and call my name until I obediently returned home so not to be stranded out there after dark. After watching the sun set until I could no longer see it, I began my descent down the tree. I was nearly at the bottom when I heard my mother's familiar voice calling my name. I thought nothing of it at first, as this routine had occurred plenty of times before. Then I realized something strange as my feet touched the ground. My mother's voice was coming from behind me, deeper in the woods, rather than towards the entrance where she always stood when she called me home. My mother had never entered those woods before, at least not with me. I was eager to find her and show her all of my favorite spots before it grew too dark. That's when I realized something was off. How could she have gone into the woods ahead of me? Certainly I could have missed her, but as I said, she never entered those woods. She continued calling my name, but there was something strange about it. She sounded absolutely frantic, almost angry. Fearing that I was in trouble for reasons currently unknown, I froze in place. As her voice drew closer, I squinted my eyes to see if I could locate her and determine exactly how angry or upset she appeared to be. However, I didn't see anyone or anything unusual. Suddenly, I heard her voice calling my name from the direction of my house, sounding much calmer. Seconds later, from somewhere within the woods yet again. It wasn't an echo. I wasn't imagining things. I was literally hearing her beckoning me from the edge of our backyard, as well as ahead of me. My legs suddenly turned to jelly. I couldn't quite comprehend what was going on. "Come here right now!" The voice that I originally believed to be her screamed from just ahead. I realized that whoever or whatever was mimicking my mother was drawing closer. I didn't question which voice was actually my mother's, as there was something about the way it sounded that unnerved me. Terrified of what I would see if I stood there much longer, I turned around and ran towards the exit of the woods as quickly as my legs could possibly carry me. It was amazing that I didn't trip over anything in my haste. Even though my house wasn't very far from where I had been standing, those woods had never seemed larger to me than they did in that moment. From behind me, my mother's voice continued to call my name, now sounding desperate. Panic set in as my actual mother finally came into view, waiting patiently as she usually did until I returned home. In my frightened state, I absolutely refused to look back. As soon as I was out of the woods and in the backyard next to my mother, the other voice was suddenly gone. Rather than fading away, it seemed to stop the very moment I stepped foot into my backyard. I must have looked as frightened as I felt, because my mother asked me what was wrong. Slowly but surely, my panic subsided. I didn't say anything until we were safely inside of the house with our doors locked. I asked my mother if she had entered the woods. Appearing confused by the question, she told me that of course she hadn't. With that confirmation, I hesitantly asked if she had heard anyone else calling my name and yelling. The answer to that question was also no, although I was still very much shaken up. I managed to explain everything that happened as clearly and rationally as possible. My mother was surprisingly nonchalant about the whole situation, explaining that I must have imagined it, that I was spending too much time out there by myself. The incident in those woods has stayed with me to this day. I can still hear that voice as clear as a bell. Whoever or whatever it was calling my name sounded exactly like my mother, but I know it wasn't her. Not only was she waiting for me outside, but the voice also sounded strange in a way that I still can't fully explain. I didn't go back into the woods until I was 17 years old, and even then, I never hung out for very long. I've carefully gone over every possible explanation, but none of them seem entirely plausible. It certainly wasn't my mother playing a prank. There was no way she could have pulled it off. Not to mention the fact that she's never been one to play pranks. I also highly doubt that it was anyone else because, as I stated before, we live in a rural area. The closest neighbor was at least a mile away, and I wasn't personally acquainted with any of them. How could they have known my name and where to find me? We've since moved out of that house, but my mother and I occasionally discuss the incident. She still claims that she never heard or saw anything unusual out there. I know it probably shouldn't. But what happened in those woods continues to bother me. I spent many hours out there prior to that day, and never had anything out of the ordinary occur. The best explanation I have at this point is a doppelganger or possibly a demon. But I'm unsure. If anyone has a possible explanation as to what might have happened, I'd love to hear it. Thank you for listening. 5. Okay, this is really going to sound crazy, but I've needed to talk to someone about this all for a while, and I can't exactly ask my guardians or friends without sounding like I'm a lunatic. Just hear me out, please. Okay, so last year, maybe around April or May, I started experiencing some weird stuff at my boyfriend's house where I was living at the time, due to a bad family situation. I have always seen shadows or people that nobody else could, but I always thought that it was my imagination or something, as many people spoke of seeing shadows out of the corner of their eyes from time to time. It all started off with a shadow I saw in my boyfriend's room, and while I tried to figure out what was making it, I found that nothing was. It stood about 6'4", if I had to make a guess, and it looked like someone's shadow, though there wasn't anyone there. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was a shadow from something outside his window that I couldn't see, and continued on with life. Let me paint you a quick picture of how the downstairs and part of the upstairs portion of the house is laid out. The living room is off to the left of the front door, and to the right of it is another room that had the computer desk and an old piano. There being no wall separating the two rooms, so the couch wasn't pressed against anything. Straight across from the door is the hallway, which has the main bedroom as the first floor to the right, then the bathroom, then my boyfriend's little sister's room, which was by a rather steep stairway that led up to me and my boyfriend's rooms, which were connected together. Off to the right of the living room is another room that had some china cabinets in it, and then attached to that was the kitchen. Okay, now that you know this, let's continue. I was down in the living room by myself, and I heard a man's voice, maybe in his late 20s or early 30s, say my name. Now I go by Alex, which isn't even remotely close to my birth name, which this man very clearly said. So that immediately raised some red flags for me. I stayed absolutely still and listened again, and I heard my birth name once again, followed by my other name, along with another man's voice and laughter. Everything went quiet, and then my boyfriend's little sister came home. I told her about it, and she believed me, though we didn't know what to do. 2 days later I heard the man again, but this time he was right behind me and whispering in my ear saying, "Hello." I couldn't move or speak due to how freaked out I was. I thought I was really going crazy this time, or that some ghost or demon was about to kill me. I stayed still, and then it felt like 2 large, warm hands were pressing down on my thighs. Not grazing them, but actually pushing down, though there wasn't much force behind it for it to hurt or restrain me. It stayed like that for a few more moments before it disappeared again. By then there were goosebumps all over my body, and I stayed out on the front porch until someone got home. Everything seemed fine for about a month or 2 after that, and I actually forgot about the whole thing more often than I remembered it. That is, until the so-called shadow started to show itself again, and in far greater detail. I would see it at night, in the middle of the day, in the bedroom, in the kitchen, or out in the hall. Those seemed to be his favorite places. After a bit, the shadow became something more. I could start making out a face and clothing, and soon enough I could see straight into the eyes of the man that seemed to be following me. You know what the Amish people look like? He looked like them. with dark blue eyes, a full beard and mustache, and a head of dark brown or black hair, a black hat, black dress pants and dress shoes, a white shirt and a dark blue jacket of some sort. He had a dark tan, never smiled, looking to be, as I expected, late 20s to early 30s. Whenever I looked at him, he was always staring me right in the eyes. I didn't know anything about him. I don't know what he wanted. If he was a part of my imagination, if he was dangerous or anything. He truly terrified me. And I found my already bad nightmares, the usual stuff that comes along with bad dreams, getting worse and worse to the point where I couldn't even sleep anymore, and had to deal with seeing him out of the corner of my eye for the rest of the night. He never once left my boyfriend's house during that time. I continued to have him follow me, or even have him walk around downstairs when I was there, or even talk to me from time to time. I once heard him say, "Call me Michael." And so that's what I began calling him inside my head. Despite him scaring the hell out of me at first, I actually grew used to him being around. He never did try to hurt me, and now that I wasn't so scared, I actually found his presence comforting. Once I moved out of his house, Michael disappeared, and I haven't seen him in months. Now I live in a camper, and he reappeared last night beside the couch and bunk bed that I sleep on. He looked the same, but now his hat is gone, and I couldn't see his face. It's being hidden in the shadows. Somehow his presence felt different, though, as if he were more malicious or angry than before. I could hardly sleep last night because of it. I ended up staying awake until the sun began to rise, which is when he just seemed to disappear. What should I do? I can't tell if I'm crazy, if some spirit is attached to me for some reason, or if it's something else entirely. Please give me some advice if you can. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 122. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, hope you've all been having a good week so far. I started watching the new episodes of Star Trek. Actually quite good so far. When we finally got the short ones in the UK, so I caught up on those. And I guess tonight I'll probably be looking for some good films to watch. Something horror. Maybe just supernatural. It doesn't have to be supernatural. It doesn't necessarily have to be horror, I suppose. Oh, we'll see what I can rustle up. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.